I wasn't going to do another review yet because I don't want to be a review channel, but it turns out that I can't get a haircut until Wednesday. And I watched this film and it left me wanting to talk about it more, I think, than any film has made me want to talk about it in quite a long time. This just gave me a lot of thoughts, made me feel a lot of ways, and decided that it's very much worth talking about. As You Are came out last year, actually. It's a 2016 film. It premiered at Sundance. Yeah, it's a 2016 film. I don't know how I didn't know about it before. I don't know how I had literally never heard of it until 3-4 days ago, but I'm glad that I did, and I watched it, and I'm glad that I did. Even though it's the film that I want to talk the most about, it is the film that I can talk the least about without ruining everything, without completely giving away the film. And so I'm going to try and keep, specific details about this film to quite a minimum. Essentially, it's about 3 teenagers in the 90s and about their relationship, their friendship. It explores identity to a great extent. It explores sexuality, especially within the context of the early 1990s. It is just a film about these 3 kids and the ways that they interact, the effects that they have on each other, and the integral roles that each of them plays in the friendship group. And it also explores their relationships with their parents and with each other's parents. Interspersed throughout this film are also scenes of each of them and a couple of the parents in an interview situation. And the interview is clearly set some time after the events of the main narrative and regards a mysterious event that happened presumably sometime during or after the main narrative. So you have that to look forward to. You're like, oh, I wonder what this thing that they're talking about is, and I wonder if I'll get to see it. And that's it. That's what the film is. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it doesn't need to be. It's directed by Miles Joris Perafit, who I haven't seen any of his other work. I don't know if he's done any other work, but if this film is anything to go by, I want to see more things that he makes. Also, the lead, Jack. I say lead. All of them are kind of the lead character, especially Jack and Mark, but I would consider Jack to be the main one, I guess, because for the most part it follows his narrative, it follows his point of view. He's played by Owen Campbell, who I also have never heard of. He and Miles don't even have Wikipedia pages. This is how under the radar they are. This is how unknown they are. I don't know what else either of them has ever done, but based on this film and this film alone, I would say that Miles is an amazing director and Owen is an amazing actor, and I really, really, really want to see more from both of them. Now, the other 2 teenagers, Mark and Sarah. Mark is played by Charlie Heaton, who plays Jonathan in Stranger Things, which is one of my favourite shows. He's one of my favourite characters. He's definitely one of my favourite performances. Bear in mind, when I watched Stranger Things, I also hadn't seen Charlie Heaton in anything else, but he, again, was one of my favourite performances in Stranger Things, one of my favourite actors in it. And it's the same here. He's one of my favourite actors in this film, which isn't particularly hard, because pretty much everyone in this film is one of my favourite actors in this film. Which brings me on to Amandla Stenberg, who is one of my favourite actors in general, and also just one of my favourite people in general. They're a very, 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 very good actor and an incredible person. In terms of feminism and gender politics and race politics and the ways that they interact, I think Amandla is one of the strongest people out there right now, especially on social media. I think they're an incredible influence. I think they're an incredible personality to have out there talking about these issues. None of this is related to the film, but I don't care. They have, indirectly, of course, not specifically, not deliberately, but they have influenced my life in a lot of ways and made me think about my identity and shaped the person that I am, and I really respect them. And so every time a role that they are in catches my attention, I'm like, gonna watch that film. I'm going to watch it. And so I watched As You Are, and I would say that Amandla Stenberg is the most impressive and the strongest performance in the film. It's a shame they're not in it for longer. They're in it for less time than I think Charlie Heaton and Owen Campbell are. But I think they're the best performance in the film, and I think it's probably their best role. I think it's probably their strongest performance. I really think they deserve to be in this film more than they were. especially considering it's supposed to be like a trio. That's the only issue I think I would take with this film, is that it's supposed to be like it's supposed to be a trio. It's supposed to be three teenagers who interact with each other, and they definitely take a step back in terms of who is at the forefront and who the main characters are. Amandla is, I would say, the least main one of the main three. But that said, because they weren't in it much, every time they were on screen, I was like, yes, very good, very good. I'm very pleased to see you again. Excellent. One of the things that I really, really liked about this film is that it's about teenagers, and a lot of films about teenagers treat teenage issues like they're not really issues. They'll go, oh yeah, he had a crush on that girl, but that was just a thing that he had when he was a teenager. Classic kid issues, and I wouldn't say that it's necessarily patronising, but I would say that it doesn't correctly translate what real being a teenager is like. This is one of the most accurate portrayals of teenagers that I've seen in my life in a film. It's also one of the most honest films that I've seen, just in terms of identity and the ways that they interact with each other. I would say it's one of the most intimate and honest films that I've seen. I think it was Miles said in some interview somewhere that I watched a couple of days ago, I think he drew from some of his experiences of being a teenager, and I can definitely see that coming through. I can see how he has directly translated what it's like to be a teenager onto the screen, rather than an adult going, yeah, I know what teenagers are and like and experience, and putting something incorrect down. This is one of the most accurate and honest portrayals of teenagers that I've seen. It's also a really subtle film. Like I said, it's set in the 1990s, but it doesn't ever actually say that. It does a really good job of letting you know that it's the 90s without telling you that it's the 90s. The only hint that there is that at one point they hear on the news that Kurt Cobain has died, and so at that point you're like, okay, so this is set in 94. But even before that I was like, this has a very 90s feel to it, a very 90s aesthetic vibe. It's very 90s. And that's a great thing that I think Miles has managed to do, is take a time period and convey that without having to say at the beginning, look, this is the 90s, don't worry, it may feel modern, but it's the 90s. And then, you know, remind you throughout the film that it's the 90s. It doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. The only thing very, very, very 90s about it is the Kurt Cobain thing. Other than that, it's very subtle and it's very, very well done. The plot, I think, is amazing because technically there's not much of it. You always feel like something is happening, especially when they're conversing with each other or when it's just showing them hanging out together. It feels like you're watching a progression, even though technically the plot is not being advanced. The three of them at one point are sitting together, smoking, just chatting, and I felt like I was watching character development on the screen in that moment. I felt like I was watching plot happening, even though technically no plot was actually happening. And that maintains all the way through until the end of the film, and I think that's really good, because it manages to be thrilling and grabs your attention, but in a very understated way, in a very subtle and very tactful way. In the last 2 days, I've watched this 3 times, which might be too many. On Rotten Tomatoes, okay, the critics' rating of it is 65%. The audience review is 58%. Those are ridiculously low. Now, I'm not one to say that critics or audiences are objectively wrong, but in this case I think that they are. Because I think if they didn't like this film, they probably didn't understand it. And that sounds really pretentious saying it out loud. But I feel like the people who didn't like it are probably people who couldn't connect to it, is all that I mean. I very much could, and also it had people in it that I really loved, and so I was engaged. And I've said this before, with my new reviews that I'm doing, I'm trying to avoid giving films like a star rating, because I don't think that's a particularly effective way of reviewing films. I think I can more accurately convey how I feel about a film through 10-15 minutes of talking than I can through 30 seconds of the acting was good, the plot was good, everything was good. 10 out of 10. So yeah, I try to skirt away from actually giving star ratings, but recently on Tumblr I've been doing a series of gift sets where I've been making a gift set for every film that I've watched for the first time this year, and after each of them I've been giving a star rating. You know, they're not supposed to be reviews, they're just supposed to be gift sets, but I add a little star rating just so that anyone who sees them can be like, oh, I might watch that, it's got a 4 out of 5, or that's got a 1. I'm not gonna watch that. The 1-star review that I gave went to the Rocky Horror remake. I enjoyed it a lot the first time I watched it, and then realised it was just a pile of garbage. Anyway, this is not the film that I'm talking about. When I did my gift set for As You Are, I gave it a 5 out of 5, which is a rating that I rarely give out. If something really impresses me, if I'm like, this is easily one of my favourite films, even then I'm usually like 4.5. I've made gift sets for over 50 films so far, just that I've watched this year, and only 6 or 7, I think, if that, have been given 5-star reviews. This was an easy 5 stars. This was one of my favourite films. I would say it's the best film that I've watched this year. Given that it was a 2016 film, I would say for me it was the best film of 2016. And I would also say that it has managed to dethrone Phoenix as my favourite film of all time. My favourite film was Empire Strikes Back, because I'm a Star Wars melt. Then it was Rogue One. Then it was usurped by Phoenix, 2014, German film. Please watch it. Very, very, very good film. I think this has pushed Phoenix off the top spot, and if it hasn't, they're even. So yeah, now my top 4 official list of favourite films would be As You Are, Phoenix, or As You Are and Phoenix, then Empire Strikes Back, then Rogue One. So yeah, I would urge everyone to watch this film. Given that the reviews for this are fine, when they should be iconic, watch the film and watch Wonder Woman.